Today, I wanted to talk about the Christian vote. How should we vote as Christians? Or do we vote? As someone that's never voted before, I have to confess this before we start because I don't want anybody to follow up and be like, hey man, who you voted for before? I've never voted. Because I've never voted, this is a new perspective for me. So, as I'm learning how the Christian vote should go, you're going to learn it with me if you're interested. Or if you've been voting all this time, maybe you can type something in a comment that's going to be very helpful for someone like me to learn how the Christian should vote. I did gather up some info just to compare and contrast, because as a Christian, we want to base our decisions from the Bible, but the Bible doesn't directly state you need to vote or you do not need to vote. It does say we should pay taxes, though. Jesus covered that part. First thing I wanted to look at was what are some reasons Christians should participate in the election? Why some Christians believe voting is a must. One of the first reasons is being salt and the light. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." Just like salt adds flavor, voting can be a way to influence society positively. This is Matthew 5:13, by the way. All right. Second reason is seeking the welfare of the city. In Jeremiah 29:7, it says, "Seek the peace and prosperity of the city, because if it prospers, you too will prosper." Voting is the only way to seek that prosperity. In a lot of ways, if you vote in a way that could impact your community negatively, it will hurt your bottom line. It will hurt your income. It will hurt how much you prosper in that community. And you may end up having to relocate and go somewhere else. And this happens all over throughout the US and every other country, really. And that's due to either participating or lack of participating in elections. Reason number three is rendering to Caesar. This is one of my favorites. I actually quote this all the time to whoever I'm talking to about taxes. When Jesus said, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's," in Mark 12:17. So participating in civic duties like voting can be seen as part of that. If the government requires us to vote, then we vote, just like the government requires us to pay taxes. But we can argue whether voting is more of a privilege than a requirement all day long. But now let's flip the coin. Let's see, why are some Christians not choosing to vote? Why might some Christians want to sit out during the election process? First reasons why some Christians choose not to vote in elections is because we are citizens of heaven. Philippians 3:20 reminds us our citizenship is in heaven. Some believe this means focusing on spiritual matters over earthly politics. I can argue, for me personally, I was in that camp. Being part of this world or immersing yourself too deep into the culture means that you are no longer focusing on the heaven above. So, in a lot of ways, I think I had this idea in the back of my mind that I am not a citizen of this place, but really a citizen of heaven. So, voting is not really required up there, I assume. Number two, avoiding worldly entanglements. 2 Timothy 2:4 says, "No one serving as a soldier gets entangled in civilian affairs." This can be interpreted as a call to avoid political involvement. And again, the key word there is interpreted. If I interpret it that way, what is it to another Christian to tell me, hey man, that's not the correct interpretation for that? Number three, trusting God's sovereignty. Proverbs 21:1 tells us the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Some feel that God's plan will prevail with or without their vote. And this is another one that allowed me to abstain from participating in these elections because I'm thinking God chooses leaders anyway, he's still in charge no matter if we vote or not. So you can see my thinking is backed up biblically on why I chose not to vote, but also choosing to vote is backed up biblically. This is where we're at a cross point. We're on a crossroad. There's a fork on the road, okay? We got to go one way or the other. So, what's the takeaway? Whether you decide to vote or not, it's essential to act according to your convictions and seek wisdom. And hey, let's respect each other's choices along the way, especially us Christians, whether somebody votes blue, red, purple, green. Because there's like, I think, four parties that run for the election or the presidential job. There's the Democrat, the Republicans, there's the Libertarian, if you weren't aware of that. Then there's the Green Party. And I've seen the Green Party since college. I was like, I think I'm going to go there. I'm just going to avoid all the other crazy stuff. But again, whatever you choose to vote will be controversial to somebody. But let's be nice to each other, especially us Christians. Last thing I wanted to share was this video by a pastor named Tony Evans. He had a different take on how Christians should vote. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So I wanted to share that with you guys. And then we'll come back and discuss just a little bit of it.
God is looking for a group of people who will stand in the midst of Democrats and Republicans and say, it ain't nothing until God says what it is. See, our problem is we miss the kingdom of God and allow the politics of men to divide the church of Jesus Christ. And the church will never be able to stand in the culture as long as the politics of men can divide it along illegitimate lines. God expects us to be involved in politics, but what he doesn't expect is to allow politics to corrupt us to the point where we lose sight of this other kingdom we are a part of. We're not for sale, and our votes are not for sale, our position is not for sale, and we stand with God.
Again, that is a whole different take than what we just discussed a minute ago, because he's talking about not being for sale. Our vote is not for sale. So this is in that camp. If you are a Christian that participates in elections faithfully every time there's one available, there is a danger that you could be sold on where to vote without you even knowing. Now, a lot of times politicians get on the television, they'll say something to appease one community, which will anger another community. When it comes to Christians, we are being called not to fall for those traps. So essentially, Pastor Tony Evans here is talking about not allowing yourself to be bought, instead voting based on your conviction and praying and your research, essentially asking God to give you the confidence and the conviction to go for what you think is right for the community that you are participating in as a Christian. So being careful that you aren't sold what to vote, what to do is very important if you participate in elections. And if you're someone like me that's never voted before, I'm coming into this thing and I'm looking at all sides and really trying to understand, how do I cast my vote as a Christian? How do I participate without feeling like I'm disappointing God ultimately, or disappointing my community? Because no matter which way you vote, you can't really vote for what you want. Say you are someone that believes in the Green Party or you're a libertarian. If you vote for any of those parties, people say you're wasting your vote. That was a big waste of a vote, because none of those parties have ever won the presidential election in the US. It's always been one of these blue or red party. If you do end up voting for one of those, someone's going to tell you you wasted your vote and that was stupid, which then brings me back to, if I'm allowed to vote and cast my own vote based on my personal choice and based on my own belief and trust and faith in God, how have I offended you now by just voting? Why did I have to choose between these two options? And my argument is, you don't. My argument is, if you want to vote, even as a Christian, you want to participate in the election, you should be able to choose whatever candidate you believe is good for the community. If you choose the Green Party, of course they have almost no chance of winning. Did you still participate? Yes. Did you still honor whatever? But we are still required to choose between two parties that we think is going to make a difference. And ultimately, it doesn't. Even some economists will tell you nothing really changes on the financial side of things, no matter which way you choose. And it's really hard for someone like me that works in finance professionally. I noticed that nothing really changes, but it's hard for me to convince that to other people and go, not much changes. Doesn't mean you shouldn't vote. It just means that if you are voting, you're either going to offend somebody. There is no winning in voting. There is no clear winner. This is why you must just make the decision and live with it. That's my final call. Make a decision and live with it. You're going to vote, vote. But just remember, as Christians, who you're voting for could make an impact to your community that's negative. If you believe your vote is going to positively affect the Christian community, then who are we to say, hey, that vote was useless? Nobody can say that. So do you, election time, and then we'll see you guys this Friday, 9:30, sharp, locked in Christians. Let's go.